Hey guys, and welcome to part 3 of our Ultimate Zelda Breath of the Wild discussion. In this segment, we'll be talking about the sense of mystery, the timeline placement, Princess Zelda as a character, voice acting, music, and lots more. Now, if you missed either part 1 or part 2, you'll find links to them in the description below. And with that, let's pick right up where we left off at. One of the leading ideas going into this game, one of the things I found the most exciting was a sense of mystery. We knew this is a Link that knew nothing about himself or his history. This is a world that, that was unfamiliar to both him and us as players. And I was looking so forward to having those mysteries answered and in a satisfactory way. I found that to be completely lacking in this game. By the time I got the plateau, I had most of my answers already, and none of them were that particularly great for me.
Me too.
I thought there was potential for the towers and shrines to be much more than what they were, at least in terms of story and maybe even a gameplay sense, just in having a greater context within this world.
Yeah.
And Link finds out pretty quick, what his role was. I'm like, oh, okay, that's...
Yeah, I mean, we were all hoping, I want to repeat real quick, we like this game.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to sound like we hate this game, which none of us do at all. But this to me is like, this is why it's a great framework for me. It's like, man, I cannot wait to see what they do next. But there's slight imperfections.
I just want to put that out there because I agree with you there, because one of the things we were talking about before this game came out was there's so much Sheikah stuff. Are we finally going to get some real explanation on the history of the Sheikah and what they're all about, and learn some of the mysteries about them? And there's, as you said, there's nothing. It's just we found this in the stone, and even then, the timeline for this game is interesting. I'm pretty sure it takes place thousands of years after Twilight Princess.
Totally. There's I don't know why. I'm just going to interject here. I don't know why there's such a debate. To me, there is really only one place in the timeline this could take place, and you already said it, Derek. It's at the very end, or the furthest end that we know of yet, of the the child timeline, the Twilight Princess timeline.
They specifically mentioned Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess.
It's so obvious. I don't know why there's an argument.
The only way I could see it being argued is if they were talking in metaphor, they weren't literally referring to those links.
Exactly.
And there was other evidence too. I thought there was a really cool throwaway line in the final battle where Zelda talks about how Ganon has given up on reincarnation, and you touched on this earlier, Derek, how he had been defeated so many times by now that he had given up on reincarnation. And I thought that was a cool bit of continuity. It would make sense at the end of the Twilight Princess timeline for Ganon to become what he has if he had just given up on reincarnation. So there was a weird. There was a weird specific adherence to certain parts of the timeline, but then for everything else they just threw everything at the screen and let's see what sticks. Koroks, let's throw them in there. Rito, let's throw those in there too. They picked and choose what parts of the timelines they wanted to take seriously.
Mm-hmm. But it's also the time scale in this. I think we don't know exactly when these divine beasts were came out with. They can't be towards Skyward Sword. I think that honestly they were made after Twilight Princess, but that's just an assumption on my part, because we're talking thousands of years ahead.
Tens of thousands.
There are so many story ideas that they could pop in there between Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. It is amazing how much room they've given themselves all of a sudden.
I was hoping so much, and I knew going into it that I was hoping for too much. I knew that I was going to be let down here, but I was so hoping that Breath of the Wild Link was going to be a reincarnation of a prior Link. I really thought that this was Ocarina of Time Link after having failed. I really wanted it to be that.
That's what I really wanted to. Is they have that split where it's Link fails timeline and this Link fails.
And that was perfect.
We really could have gotten to that point. Explain it and put it in there, and nope.
Imagine that cool feeling when if you were to learn that you were playing as Ocarina of Time Link, having been healed and reincarnated after having failed in that particular split of the timeline. What a cool thing that would be.
How awesome would it have been to see a flashback to Ocarina of Time, but redone with modern graphics to the final battle, but where he fails.
I can't. So much.
The sword gets thrown away. Link gets mortally wounded. Zelda sails him, takes him to the Shrine of Resurrection, and then time passes.
This is killing me. There is so much wasted potential in this story.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what affected me more than a lot of people is. Again, I had a great time with this game, but I also see so many areas in which they can improve the game or improve in the future. So, now speaking, we kind of touched on Zelda right there. What did you guys think of the ending to this game?
It was what I expected.
What's that mean?
It was. I mean, it was like the happy ending I expected, and the happy ending that didn't pay heed to the obvious. What you mentioned, Andre. Like, why isn't Zelda old? Well, there's no real reason she's not old, because it wouldn't have been as happy and satisfying an ending, and that's exactly what I expected.
I felt like it could have been even more satisfying with that. Like, it would have added a sense of. Well, for one, realism.
We're just got finished fighting a giant pig, but we weren't realism.
No, but I mean, it'd be internally consistent then.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Link makes sense. Why isn't Zelda old? And no one seems surprised by this such 100 years later, and she still looks like she's 16 or whatever.
Well, it's obviously because she's existed as like a light entity for the past 100 years, and not as an actual human, Andre. Obviously. No, there's no good reason. No, my whole point is there's
other than magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, magic and the goddess.
I think it would have been more interesting if they had pulled an Impa from Skyward Sword. It's the future now, and she actually did age in that time. It's like, oh crap, you're gonna die soon. That's sad. That sucks.
I see what you're saying. Totally. Yeah.
Right? I don't know. It would have, at the very least, it would have made me feel something, whereas the current ending made me feel nothing. For comparison, like even something as simple as a celebration from like Ocarina of Time, like that felt meaningful. Like that was fun. It was fun seeing other characters on your journey. Or Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask's ending did a great job of justifying or providing a reward for everything you had done to help everyone else in the world. Because the more you did in the world, the better the ending you got. You got to see more of how your actions affected these people. Here, you don't get any of that. You have this big world, and it doesn't play a part in the ending at all.
I mean, I have two thoughts on that. One is that I do agree with you that it would have, it would have been more shocking and more realistic for them to go with the ending you're saying, Andre. However, this is Nintendo we're talking about, not Square Enix, not Atlas. We're not talking about master storytellers here necessarily. So I see what you're saying. But I wasn't necessarily expecting that kind of, they're not going to risk that with Zelda. Impa, sure, but Zelda, this is Nintendo we're talking about. On the other hand, this is hard because on one hand, I'm really happy they got their happy ending because that version of Link and Zelda, or those incarnations of Link and Zelda, went through so much crap, even by Link and Zelda standards. They really had the screws put to them, even by Link and Zelda standards. However, there wasn't nearly as much characterization between them as, say, Link and Zelda in The Wind Waker, or, A Link Between Worlds, or Skyward Sword especially, yeah.
Oh, Derek's going to disagree.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on that. I honestly think this is one of the stronger characterizations we've ever seen of Zelda.
Of Zelda, yes, just not of Link. I think Zelda's
Link,
there.
We got a little bit of Link. We got, if you read Zelda's diary in Hyrule Castle, you do get a characterization for Link. Why he's so quiet, because he feels the pressure of being the hero. So rather than respond to it or anything like that, he just keeps quiet, keeps his emotions bottled up, and just tries to do the best that he can, but he does feel the pressure because he opened up to that.
That is one hell of a lampshade.
Of course there is, because they got to find some reason for him to be mostly quiet. I mean, he talks,
they never did before,
and that he responds. I know, but when everybody else is talking, it makes it a lot more obvious.
I have a different criticism of that, and that is, I appreciate that they added that, and I thought that was a cool bit of exposition, and I'm willing to suspend my disbelief. Fine. Don't lock it away in an optional diary entry that you may never see. Put it front and center in a required story scene. That's what I would have preferred personally. But yeah, I can see why they didn't. I'm not saying that would have been unilaterally better. I think the approach they took for Breath of the Wild is probably the one that was, they had to take. But this is all stuff that fleshes out this story that I wanted to spend more time in, but there just simply isn't enough of it. There's not enough story, and that bit of exposition in Zelda's diary could so easily have been a cutscene that, in my opinion, would have been more interesting. A memory. That could be a memory. Zelda, tries to talk to Link and learns why Link doesn't talk. But of course, they would have had to have a Link voice actor in that case, and that wouldn't have worked. So, there are hurdles. I'm not saying there's a silver bullet for this, but I'm just, so much of that characterization I felt was optional.
Kind of, but Link, we're never going to get a ton of personality for him, and we did get a bit of personality there with just his actions and the way he reacts, like his cooking animation, like with his faces when he's cooking something, he gets this really happy smile on him. He's serious, but he's also he takes his job very seriously. We see that from the memories. He doesn't give up on Zelda no matter how many times she tells him to go away. Like, he is dedicated to that duty, but he's also kind of a goofball in a lot of times, and also a hell of a ladies' man. Like, we've seen, like, We knew Ocarina of Time Link was a bit of a ladies' man. Like, Breath of the Wild beats him out. Like, everybody wants Link.
That's true. That's a good point.
It is crazy. But I mean, we can argue all day about Link
Right.
and what his characterization is going to be. We're never going to get that much beyond like the visual storytelling because of the open world nature.
Disagree.
We're not going to
Link?
get that
Sure.
much. Yeah, we get a lot of personality for Wind Waker.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
And for Skyward Sword Link, but they're also in a game that provides more story cutscenes. Sure. We don't get those in this one. The memories are very much focused on Zelda. That's what these memories are all about. It's all about Zelda. That's where her characterization is. And guess what? She is the most fleshed out character in this game, and probably one of the best Zeldas in the series because she is, she feels the pressure of failing. She feels the pressure of not being able to access the goddess, and you can get to see like how this strains her relationship with her father, and like she just wants to be this nerdy kid who wants to investigate all the ancient Sheik attack, but she can't because she needs to go into this whole goddess business, and she cannot do it. And she resents Link for that until he saves her, and she finally gets to know a little bit more about him. And you get this, rather than being childhood friends like Skyward Sword, you see this sort of like not so much into each other, but then sort of learn more about each other kind of love story that they get.
Oh, they're clearly hooking up after the end of Breath. There's so much obvious.
Totally.
Yeah, it's so obvious that this Link and Zelda especially are. Yeah.
That one cutscene where she's picking flowers or whatever.
Oh. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
I think everyone does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I respect that, Derek. I didn't get much of a sense of either their character dynamic or the story in general in this game. So it felt like too little for the size of the game.
I will say,
I wish there was more, but I didn't feel it when I was watching the memories as I got them, but once I watched them all in order, that's where I got it.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of failing of the game, though, in a sense, right?
Sure.
If you don't get a sense while playing the game, you have to watch it, and it's better if you watch on YouTube and see how they come together.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. Like, the one part of this story I do think was handled well was Zelda's characterization. I do like this Zelda, and I do like that we learn so much about her. That said, I agree with you too, Andre, that like the fact that you don't get that much of a sense of who she is unless you watch them all back to back once you've gotten all the memories, that is a failing on the part of the game.
I would actually agree. Otherwise, I do like Zelda, even if there's not much of her. However, one aspect I wasn't a huge fan in regards to Zelda was her voice acting.
Yeah, I knew that's where we were going to go from here.
Yep.
So real quick, I want to say that I actually liked overall, putting aside the performances themselves, I actually liked how voice acting was incorporated into the game. Mm-hmm. I think some people wanted more, some people may not want any at all. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a good amount. I thought they actually struck a good balance. Even if I wish there was more story in general, I didn't think it was jarring when the characters did talk, or at least that much. I thought it did add. It add a little bit of a punctuation mark to those cutscenes. Like, oh, this is pretty important. What's going on here? But when it came to the individual performances, that's where I'm a little bit less enthusiastic.
Yeah.
I don't know who Nintendo gets to direct these things. I don't know whose fault to blame it at, because they were just wildly inconsistent. Like, some were really good with what they had to work with.
Yeah.
Others felt like they really struggled or just wasn't feeling it. And I think Zelda had the potential to be just fine, except for that stupid British accent. Like, no other character has that accent, and I know they're trying to make her seem more royal, and so they go for the refined, all British are refined, so we'll go with that accent, that kind of thing. But it really wasn't needed, and it made her just stand like it. It took a while for me to really get behind her, but then there's certain scenes that I think she nailed, honestly. And one of those is the flower scene, like her just goofing around and fighting this frog and wanting Link to lick the frog so she can do an experiment. Like those scenes she did really well on, but it doesn't she doesn't have a good first impression, because the first memory I found was the one where she's doing the ceremony, and that one's she's supposed to sound disinterested in that, but it really threw me for a loop because I didn't fully realize it.
Yeah, she's not horrible. She's not the worst voice actor in the game. But I felt like, and I actually have no problem at all with her accent. I mean, Game of Thrones is the same thing, where they have all kinds of accents for
Yeah.
whatever reason. It doesn't really matter to me. But I did think her performance was a bit flat at points, when I would have expected more from both the character as well as the context for those scenes. But my bigger issue is some of the other characters. I think the worst one, I think maybe both of you would disagree with me on this, is the Zora princess. I thought she was horrible.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
I disagree.
I agree with you. I agree with Andre.
Yeah, no, I am the sole. Yeah, I actually thought Mipha was fine. I thought her delivery was good. I mean, I get why people think she's annoying, and I know that people don't like that archetype of the high-pitched, anime-type girl. I get that, but I actually thought her delivery was somewhat considered, and actually, like, it felt like there was purpose behind it, where compared to something like Zelda, where some of the delivery was a bit flat, and especially compared to someone like the Deku Tree, who sounded like it was amateur hour at Nintendo voice acting. Like, I'm sorry whoever did that voice, but
Well, here,
nope.
if I'm correct in this, I've heard this. I'm not sure if it's true, but if I'm correct, from what I hear, the person who did the Deku Tree also did Rivali, and Rivali's my favorite.
I agree.
Wow, Rivali's good.
great.
That surprises me.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. It's a little bit tricky here to draw where exactly the line is, if it's just a weak performance or if it's just the script. Because I don't think these characters spoke in the best of ways. And granted, I don't either. But I'm not a character in the Zelda game, and I feel like Nintendo's writers, the Treehouse is capable of some fantastic writing. I don't know if they're great at writing speeches or actual
Dialogue, like writing dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue. Yeah, there we go. This is more to my point. I'm not great at speaking.
It plays differently when you're hearing it rather than reading it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's part of the failing for me, at least, with the Zora Princess. Like that to me just read as if I were reading it. Like that is it did not sound remarkable in any way. It didn't sound like something a character would actually say. And that's why I thought what's his name? Rivali?
Yeah, Rivali.
Yeah. That's why I thought he and actually the Goron, or both Gorons, I can't even remember anymore. It's been so long now.
Daruk, probably, because the other guy barely talked.
Daruk's okay. Yeah, no, Daruk was fine.
Yeah, part of the reasons why I liked those characters was both because I actually thought their voice acting was good, but also those two expressed personalities. Like, those two felt like actual people to me. They felt like, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of get this guy. Like, he feels like a real character to me. Like, I get where he's coming from. And that's not a sense I got with some of these other characters.
See, what's so funny is, like, I see what you're saying, but I feel like Rivali specifically, I know you guys both like Rivali, and I thought he was fine, but he is literally Falco. Like, he's so one note. Everything you guys like about him is based on one personality trait, and that he's like a
Yeah, but he does that personality trait so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. And it does not get more real than Falco, okay? Falco Lombardi is as real as it gets.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Because let's be honest, all of these characters had a one-note personality trait.
Yeah, they did.
None of them got to evolve beyond what they were, because we barely got time with any of these champions.
I will say, though, with the possible well, no, they all were pretty one note, but I will say I think maybe my favorite memory in the game, or one of my favorites, was the one with Urbosa, where Zelda has fallen asleep after a day in the desert of checking out sights. She falls asleep, and Urbosa kind of confides in Link about Zelda and how she feels, and the problem she's facing and the burden she's facing. I thought Urbosa was the best actress in this game, best actor, actress, performer in this game.
No,
period.
Rivali was the most fun. Urbosa was probably the best.
Yeah, I agree with that.
She even has this really badass line where she talks about the history of the Gerudo and how she's ashamed that Ganon came from the Gerudo tribe.
That's cool. I remember that.
And what's the correct mistake? I was like, oh, she did that. I was like, oh, that's badass.
Yeah. She's my favorite champion, by the way. Just throwing it out there. Too.
It's real split between her and Rivali, because I love Rivali's cockiness.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny, because for me it's between Urbosa. I mean, it is Urbosa, but for me the only other challenger would be Mipha. I actually did like her. We definitely diverged on that point, because I thought Mipha was cool.
All right. Well, speaking of audio-related topics, let's talk about the music real quick, because that's something else. I mean, well, like everything in this game, it is dramatically different than the other Zeldas, where the music really takes a more kind of a backseat in this game. It's rarely front and center in what's happening. What do you guys think of that approach? Did you think it was the right choice for this game, and is that something you'd want to see return?
Absolutely the right approach for this game. It really did just highlight, like, the exploration, the natural element, the wildness of this world, and it never felt off to me. It just felt right. It was like I really can't imagine any other take on this type of gameplay. For the future, it really depends on what they're going to go for, because I don't think this approach would work for something like Wind Waker, where you're sailing and all you're hearing is seagulls and the ocean waves and that kind of thing. I don't think it would have quite the same effect. But for this game, the ambience and the occasional music cues that really punctuate certain scenes, I think do work.
You basically kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I think it works really well for this game, and I don't think any other approach would have worked so well for this game. However, as an approach in general, I do miss the days of playing a Zelda game with a really rousing overworld theme. And just like with a really strong melody line, and it felt more like you're playing a video game with music accompanying what you're doing. I do miss that as a fan of video game music. However, I do think for this open world game, I think this was the correct approach, and it did make it so that in those few moments when the music did come front and center, it really, really stood out, like during the boss fights, or the one part, or one of the only parts I liked about the final boss, Dark Beast Ganon, the music. It did that, and I tweeted about this. It does that thing where it recalls the main theme of the entire game, and it plays it during the final boss, and it just makes your brain explode because it's so cool. But the fight sucked, so there's that. But yeah, I think in general it worked as an approach for this game, and it definitely highlighted the music even more when it did come front and center. But later on, I don't know if I want to see this approach again. Well, but then again, Aonuma did say they intend on doing more open world Zeldas, and in that case, it's hard.
I don't know. I'm still torn on this, because on the one hand, it may have been the right choice and maybe the only choice without it becoming perhaps repetitive or super annoying. On the other hand, I also did feel like I was missing something. So even if it may have been the right choice, I still feel like something may have been lost in the process. Because I think my favorite moment of the game, or one of my favorite moments, definitely not my favorite moment, but one of my favorite moments was going through Hyrule Castle, and that actually had an actual song playing the entire time, and I loved it. I thought that was great, and I'm like, dang, this is kind of what I missed from the rest of the game. And I think to some degree, it actually did affect my immersion throughout the rest of the game, where I felt this is gonna sound a little bit weird, but I felt like the sense of coldness or the sense of warmth in the desert, they weren't conveyed to me as well as in past Zelda games. Apparently, it comes through in the music, and I didn't realize that before, but now it seems to. And so I do wonder if there was a way to maybe kind of find some kind of middle ground between the two, where maybe it starts off softly and then turns into like a full-fledged song before fading away again for a while, and then it comes back periodically. The closest example I can think of in Breath of the Wild is when you're riding the horse at night, you occasionally get like little glimpses of the Zelda theme, and I love that. Cool. And I think they could have gone even farther with that. And I think that might be an area worth exploring if they do go with a similar style of Zelda in the future.
I agree, and I mean, there were certain parts of the game that did have that kind of, slightly more present music, like Zora's Domain was a very loose kind of rearrangement of the Zora's Domain from Ocarina of Time, and I thought that was nice, but it was way too...
stuff like that.
And I guess the only other example I can think of off the top of my head, which I remember I chatted with you about, and you were like, ugh, how do you even know this, was in Death Mountain, the piano stings are actually the same, it's basically level 9 from Zelda 1, it's like the same melody. And I thought that was kind of a cool callback, but I agree, it's barely there, and you'd have to really be looking for it or listening for it, and of course right. I guess I was, but I agree that in future iterations of this formula, I think I'd want the music to be more present, for sure.
You know me, I enjoy my music, but I have a hard time communicating it. I just know what I like, so...
yeah.
If it fits for the game, I'm going to enjoy it. It was less pronounced, but I still just... I don't know, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Alright, well I think this might be a good time to touch on what might be the final big point here, and that is what do we want to see next for Zelda? But that's unfortunately going to have to wait until next time, so make sure you stay tuned for part 4 coming up very soon, in which we'll discuss where exactly we want to see Zelda go in the future. And with that, thanks for watching, and of course stay tuned to GameXplain for lots more on Zelda Breath of the Wild and everything else Nintendo Switch 2.